Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 198. Your sex life is an illusion. Oh no. I wanted to start off by talking about what I see happen with couples a lot when they come to me struggling with intimacy. They often talk about the change, right? How there's a shift that takes place. And usually what they start talking about is what their relationship was like when they were dating, right? All the fun things they used to do, all the excitement, all the rush of falling in love, the newness, the variety, being able to relate to another person on multiple levels, all the different conversations of getting to know somebody and developing that relationship. Now, what is interesting is that when you first start dating somebody or have been dating them for a while, there really is not a high level of expectation that you're going to get sex. And if you're raised in a very religious upbringing or just in a home and an environment where you were taught a lot of high morals and abstinence, then this also will contribute to you going into the relationship thinking, like we're just dating, we're seeing where this relationship is going to go so that maybe one day it would lead to a sexual relationship. And so what this ends up creating is an environment where a person's agency to have sex or not have sex during the dating phase is extremely high, right? There's no expectation of like, hey, this is our second date, so I'm expecting sex, right? It's more of like, hey, let's work through this. Let's develop the relationship. And so agency becomes a huge component and a huge factor. And this is something we don't really talk about, or we don't even really realize that it's having a play. It's having an impact on the experience. And I will circle back around more towards the end of this episode about why agency becomes so important. And also, while we're dating, a lot of times the dating experience comes when we're just a little bit younger in life, right? Unless this is a second marriage. But oftentimes we just have less responsibilities, right? We don't have a home yet that we're trying to keep up with all the insurance aspects of it, or, really keep up with all the different bills. And even if we're living on our own, our bills may be minimal in our dating years. And so there are really less responsibilities. We might be at a job where it's not really our main career. We're not trying to climb up the ladder. We're just like, we just need enough money to pay our bills. We may still be in college when we are dating. And this also comes into play with the amount of independence that we have and experience and that we enjoy, right? There's a high level of freedom. And a lot of times when we started dating our spouse, we didn't have kids, right? Or the responsibilities that come with having children. And so often during the dating experience, we have these beautiful ideas, these beautiful dreams and visions, these lovely ideals and expectations that, when the time comes, we are going to have an amazing sex life together. It's going to be lovely. It's going to be fulfilling. It's going to be satisfying. And because we will have developed our relationship to this amazing level where we want to be sexual with one another, we're both going to want to have sex like a lot with each other. And it's going to be amazing. And both the guy and the girl think this, right? I love talking to newlywed couples and saying, okay, let's talk about what you think your sex life is going to be like. They actually have very much the same idea. They have very much the same expectations. Like, it's going to be amazing. We're going to want each other every day. The frequency is going to be high. And they're both kind of on the same page. And then it's very interesting that once the marriage takes place, something happens. There is a shift that takes place. And I love to really dive into this and say, what changed? What shifted? And a lot of times a couple can have some ideas of the shift that took place. And a lot of times they don't totally know how to put it in words, or they don't totally have it nailed in their mind. And unfortunately, when we don't have a clear idea of what changed, how it changed, why it changed, that leaves our mind open to a lot of assumptions, right? This means we're going to have a lot of negative thoughts about our spouse, about ourselves, and about sex. And so this is going to create a whirlwind for us when it comes to sex. And it's not a fun one to be in, if we're being honest, right? It gets really messy. It's super frustrating. There's a lot of anger and resentment. And so we get married, and these lovely, lovely, wonderful ideals and expectations that we had in our mind, they don't get met. They don't get met for the husband, and they don't get met for the wife. Now, what really ends up happening is what we do when these lovely expectations do not get met. And the trap that we fall into is that we don't have the skills to deal with unmet expectations in a way that is healthy, that is beneficial, and that serves both husband and wife as well as the marriage as a whole. We don't have the skills, right? Now, what I like about this is that, hey, if we just don't have the skills to deal with unmet expectations, well, the solution is simple. We just need some new skills. We just need the skill of learning how to deal with an unmet expectation. And that's amazing, because that means we don't have to change our spouse's entire personality, and we don't have to change our own entire personality to improve things. The only thing we need to do is gain that skill of knowing how to manage unmet expectations. Well, we can do that. Humans can learn new skills. Man, we are amazing at that. And if we really think that that is the solution, that feels so much lighter than trying to say, man, we have these horrible, deep, heavy problems in our marriage, and we're never going to be able to, fix that one over there. So that means we're never going to be able to fix our challenges when it comes to sex. If we just need a new skill, wow, that seems like totally possible, totally doable. And that can give us so much hope and give us that vision that, yeah, things can totally improve. Like, let's improve them. Let's learn that skill. Let's get on it. What are we waiting for? Why continue in misery when we can just learn the skill? So if we don't have the skill, then we're not going to know what to do with this struggle in our mind of, hey, I thought sex was going to be like this, and now it's not, right? We don't know what to do with that. So we continue to fall deeper and deeper into these traps and into these assumptions. Now, what's interesting is that when a man is met with his expectation that's being unmet, unfulfilled, he may have a thought that sounds something like this. You know, before we got married, she sure seemed like she wanted it, right? She was seemed kind of hot and ready to go. But maybe she knew. Maybe she knew she wasn't really going to be into it. And this was all just some ploy to get me to commit so we could get to making the babies, right? She's using me to have babies. She wants the babies. And so when a man starts to think this, he is not going to feel amazing. No, he is going to feel awful. This is awful. He is going to feel like he was used just to provide the sperm for the babies, right? And now that we're married, now that she's got the babies, man, our sex life has changed. She got what she wanted, and now she doesn't seem very interested in sex. She used me. And this is how many men think. I don't blame them. That's just the natural thought that would come when sex and the sex life doesn't meet these lovely expectations that we had. Now, the same thing is happening for the woman, right? She had her own lovely expectations of the experience of what it would be like to have sex with her husband once they were married. And then they get married and they start having sex. And she's like, wait a minute, this is not the experience I thought it was going to be. What is happening? And then all of a sudden, she starts falling into a trap where she starts also having very negative thoughts and will have these assumptions that are also awful about her husband. And what that might look like is something like this. He kind of knew what he was doing. And he knew that marriage was the way to get that green light, that all access pass to pleasure. And, he only married me so that he could have this constant sexual pleasure. He just used me for that. And so you have a husband that feels used, and you have a wife that feels used, right? And man, if we feel used by the person we consider to be the love of our life, that is not a fun feeling, right? In any way, shape, or form. It's not fun. It's not fun to be there. And so what ends up happening is we both fall into these traps, both the husband and the wife, where we think they knew and they used me anyways. So it's interesting when I work with couples and we start talking about these challenges, I try to put it in a form that we can start to think about it differently as being in a certain state of mind, a certain mental mind space. And I often call it the sex matrix, right? And even to take it to a level that's more specific, the married sex matrix. And so I explain that this is a place where we have these expectations. We have these lovely, lovely ideals and expectations of how things are going to go. And then we find that there are glitches in the system, right? Wait a minute, Mayday, things are not going according to plan. And if any of you have seen the movie The Matrix, this is kind of like the main character, Neo, who's a computer hacker, and he's all on the internets and he's finding glitches in the system. And Neo comes to a point on his journey where he's going to have to make a very important decision. He is going to have to make a decision of, hey, I'm either going to stay and remain kind of ignorant to the source of these glitches, or I am going to take that leap, and it might be a bit scary, but I'm going to take that red pill and I am going to become awakened and alive to the reality of what's actually going on, what's actually causing these glitches in the matrix. And each of us are going to have to do this same thing. We can either take the blue pill and remain totally ignorant, right? But this also means we're probably going to remain in a state of feeling used and miserable and stuck. Or we can take that leap of faith that requires a little bit of courage to take that red pill and learn the reality of what's actually going on in our sex lives, right? And stop living by just these ideals and expectations, but not addressing what's happening in reality. Now, I wanted to pull in a quote from Plato that I really thought applies to this. And it goes like this. Well, maybe it's not an exact quote, but he suggests that the true essence of another person is not what we perceive with our senses only, but is based on its actual quality in reality. And that most of us, most people, only perceive a small fraction of its quality and are thus limited to that false perception of it. Now, this is really comes into play when it comes to our expectations of sex, right? Husbands often think that their wife is going to enjoy sex in the same way that they are. And a wife will often think that her husband is going to enjoy the conversations and the romance and the emotional connection just in the same way and just as much as they do. And sometimes that is not the reality. And we don't know what to do with that. What do we do with that? And so we have to really do what Plato is suggesting. We have to look at what are the actual qualities of what's taking place for our spouse in reality. And we're going to realize, hey, it's not what we thought. And so as we address this and say, let's take a look at the real, right? That's where we can start to have a major impact, a major influence for good on our own sex life. This is an awesome, awesome theme. Now, like I said before at the beginning, we don't realize when we're dating that agency actually plays a fun and exciting role, especially for women. And when we get married, and now all of a sudden there is a new expectation of, hey, we're married and sex needs to happen all the time, right? Sex frequency needs to go up, it needs to skyrocket. All of a sudden, her agency has taken a back seat. And something that used to play a major role in the dating experience has been replaced with duty, right? It's your duty to be available sexually for your husband. It's your duty to be the sexual wife and be the convenience store, like 7-Eleven, open 24 hours. It's your duty to do that. And all of a sudden, she doesn't even feel or experience her own agency. So now sex gets put into the same category of responsibilities and chores. Well, that's not a fun way to experience sex for a woman. She still also wants to experience sex with all the fun aspects of it and the agency aspect. We don't realize just how fun and flirtatious that agency component is. So we're going to need to address this, right? We're going to need to step into that superhero role and say, let's take a look at this. We're going to have to think a little bit different. We're going to have to think in a way that is more elevated, more rational, more logical, and say, let's deal with things as they truly are. I like to tell my clients, think of it as leaving the sex matrix behind, right? With its faulty systems and assumptions and expectations. And let's move into the world of the intimacy matrix, right? Where we're going to deal with this on a mature level, an adult level. And we're going to start to get real results if we can make this shift. And so what I want to offer as the first step in doing this and making this shift is to realize that the experience of sex in marriage is way different for women than it was beforehand when she was just dating, right? I don't think, and with the clients I've worked with, the experience of sex has not changed for the husband, whether he had sex before he was married and then the experience of sex in marriage, the pleasure he receives from that has not changed. But for the woman, it has completely changed. So what I have learned is that when there is a change in the expectation for sex, right? Whereas before while she was dating, there was agency there, and then it got replaced with duty. Now you're just expected to have sex. When there is a change in that expectation, there is a change in her experience. This is key knowledge. Her experience of sex changes. It's not the same experience. The pleasure is much harder to tap into when you're doing it out of duty than just like, hey, we're into each other. Let's do it. It is a completely different sexual experience. And it's not as good, which is why her desire for it is going to go down. So this is an important thing to start to really consider and put in the forefront of our minds, that there was an actual change in the experience for the woman. And that came as a result of a change in expectation that she now had to just perform. So the interesting thing is that she never knew that this was going to happen to her. She didn't know that the experience was going to change for her. She didn't know that the expectation was going to have such a strong impact on her in the negative. That means that this shift and this change came as a surprise to her. She was not prepared for it. And so it caught her totally off guard. And it was also like a shock to her. What? I was looking forward to sex. I thought I was going to want it all the time. I thought it was going to be amazing. But now that he just expects sex 24 hours a day, yeah, my whole experience of this is not good. This is a shock to her. She didn't expect it. She didn't plan on this. She didn't tease you and try to just get you to have the babies. Like, this is a major shock to her system, and it's a sad one. And she doesn't know what to do with this any more than a husband knows what to do when he sees like something's changing. I don't know what to do with this. Either does your wife. Now, it's interesting because when our bodies are caught off guard or something scares us or surprises us or shocks us, we can go into fight or flight or the freeze response. We all know what this is. But this can even happen with sex, right? We may not fear that like we're physically going to die, but our brains can still trigger like, hey, this is uncharted territory here. This is a little sketchy. We don't know what to do here. Things did not go according to plan. And now we're kind of walking on eggshells here. And maybe now the wife is going into that resistant mode, right? That's the fighting mode. I'm going to resist sex because I don't like how this feels. This doesn't feel amazing. I'm going to fight it. She may go into that flight mode of like, I'm just going to run away from sex. I'm going to be too busy. I'm not going to be around. I'm going to avoid sex. Or she may go into that freeze mode where she's like, okay, well, I still want to be a good wife. I want to make the marriage work. I'm going to do the duty sex. Like, I'm going to freeze. I'm going to have like the dead fish sex, right? I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to lay there. And that's not an enjoyable experience either. What a mess, right? What a mess. I'm wondering if we can have compassion for one another, right? Let's increase our compassion that this came as a surprise. Let's give our spouse the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, no, they didn't plan on this. Women don't plan on sex that sucks. We didn't plan on that experience to be so negative for us. We wanted it to be amazing. So let's give one another the benefit of the doubt and say, no, they didn't mean to use us. We just were a little bit naive. Well, we can deal with the naivete. We can deal with that. We just need a new skill, right? Let's increase our compassion for ourselves and for our spouse and for the concept of sex, right? All these things can be improved. It's solvable. So we need to actually address the true essence of how sex has changed. We need to address the shift. We need to address that the expectation has shifted and has affected the quality of sex, the ability for the woman to experience pleasure. Now, what's interesting too is that sex, when you're married, usually comes with a whole heap of added responsibilities, right? The babies have arrived. The bills have arrived. The homeowner's insurance is here. The home, keeping up of the home, the maintenance, right? The careers. All of a sudden, more responsibilities are taking up vital mental real estate, right? Where we used to have a lot more real estate to be able to really enjoy the making out and all the fun emotions that came with that, all the sensations and the pleasure and what it felt like to flirt and be turned on. Yeah, like there's so much happening now up in our brain that there isn't as much room for all of that fun stuff. And we need to free some of that mental real estate back up. Right? But we don't even think about that. So a suggestion I have for both the husband and the wife is to really look at that mental real estate, to look at that stress. I love to bring up this important note that stress is one of the biggest blockers to a woman feeling in the mood, right? Let's take a look at that stress in reality. Can a husband say, hey, what's one thing I can take off your plate right now? Can a husband ask that? Yes. And can a wife advocate for that and also ask for that? Yes. Hey, it would be amazing if you could just take this one thing off my plate. It would only take like a minute to do, right? That's like that clue, right? Using the phrase, can I take one thing off your plate? Or let's talk about the one thing on the plate. That's a clue of like, hey, I'm interested in sex. Let's lower the stress one notch and free up some mental real estate to think about the sexy things. Let's sex things up a bit. Let's make things sexy. We can do that. Husbands can do that and wives can do that. Husbands can ask questions and wives can advocate. Right? We both can be involved in ways that are super healthy and beneficial. And let's put agency back in, right? Especially for the woman. Let's allow her to feel that she has a say, right? So she can feel that desire start to burn within her again, like, hey, he's looking kind of sexy today. Maybe let's get into things. Let's make out a bit. When she feels like she has a say in the experience and she's not just like, hey, he grabbed my butt, he wants to have sex right now, right? When she can feel her own agency again, man, that's a fun place for her to be. And that means that's going to be a fun place for the husband to be as well. So let's put agency back into the mix, right? We don't talk about sex like this. We usually don't think about this concept of agency once you're married and if you've been married for several years. But this is fun. Let's put that back in. So, husbands, start asking some questions, right? Get curious about your wife, about her agency, about her stress levels, about expectations and that shift. And women advocate for that shift. Advocate and say, "Hey, that's a shift for me that shocked me and I didn't like it, but let's address it. Let's work through it." And advocate for what is going right and what is going well. I remember one time when my husband and I we wanted to, you know, start getting busy and start getting sexy with each other. And we started making out. And I remember after a while he was ready. He's like, let's take things to the next level. Let's go make out in the bedroom because we had been on the balcony. And I was like, actually, I want to stay here. I want to stay in this space where we're making out. This is so enjoyable. My body is really connecting to this. It's my arousal is building. And I advocated for staying in that space of making out. And so we did. We stayed there for another 5 to 10 minutes. And then we moved on to the sexy time. And it was amazing, right? We had an amazing experience. Super connected. And so I want to show the women how you can advocate for yourself and advocating for the things that you need to get aroused. And also to show the husbands that ask some good questions to your wife so that you can gain that insight of what needs to take place, of how to move things along in a way that's fun and sexy and still keeps your wife's agency at the forefront. You do that by asking questions. It's amazing. It's not hard. It's not difficult. And so I just want to end this episode by really challenging each spouse. If you're a wife, advocate for the things that you know help you to feel and experience your arousal and that buildup, that turn on to a higher degree. Advocate for it. And if you're a husband, ask some questions, find out the mysteries of your wife. Ask her what she would like to experience so that you are helping to put that agency of hers back in the mix so she can give you that insight. Ooh, I want to turn on, some sexy music for a little while. I want to, light the fireplace for a little while. Asking questions allows her to share with you her wants, and it puts that agency back in. And that is a much more fun and powerful place to approach sex. And when a woman is able to have those things in place, then the experience is better. You put a better experience, a more pleasurable experience back into married sex. And then she can be coming back for more, right? And that is an amazing thing. So challenge yourself this week to either ask more questions or advocate for the things that get you aroused. Because remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy with yourself, the more you restore it with your spouse. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you will join me again next week.